Pokémon has been a worldwide phenomenon since 1996, in the good old 90s. These little weirdos have been plastered on everything from trading cards to lunchboxes to public transportation. I've always been kind of obsessed with this series. Long before I ever played my first game, I was introduced to the world of Pokémon by the anime, and I'm sure that's a fairly common experience. Ash and his little group of buddies epitomize what the core of Pokémon is, working alongside your partners so that you can all become the best versions of yourself, whether that means growing as a person or literally growing into a bigger, stronger form with like extra arms or something. The show states it plainly in the original title theme: you teach me and I'll teach you. This is a breakdown of all of the hidden meanings in the lyrics of the Pokemon original series theme song. Number 1, I want to be the very best. It's a very subtle nod to wanting to be the very best. Pokemon has flirted with the idea of queerness since the very beginning. In its first season, Ash dresses up as a girl to gain access to the Celadon City gym, and this would be my favorite episode for years to come, to the point where when Pokemon would come on the TV, I would hold my breath through the title sequence hoping it was this episode. Team Rocket's Jessie and James have been everyone's favorite gender non-conforming queer-coded villains since their debut. This characterization is probably the most memorable thing about them, aside from them being, you know, incompetent. While both of these aspects of Team Rocket are played for laughs, the way these criminals are seemingly incapable of successfully robbing a 10-year-old is the joke that the show likes more. The nonconformity is more so just a pillar of these characters. It's not just in the series though. Beauty Nova from Pokemon X and Y is kinda famous online for being the first character in the series to casually mention her transformation. This is even more explicit in the original version of her dialogue, where she comments on how medical science is awesome. And who can forget the iconic main characters from the first generation on their idyllic tropical island honeymoon. I mean, they've literally dressed up and gone traveling together. When I was a kid, I was desperate for anything that felt personal to my existence. A lot of the time, characters in media felt more like something I should aspire to be, a representation of how I was supposed to be. A lot of my favorite characters weren't ones that I personally related to, but were more just the ones that I thought were cool or funny. Actually, I don't think I ever really had a favorite character. And for the longest time, I usually just said that the main character was my favorite because that was very easily understood by other people. And then I found Pokémon Adventures. I think I found this manga at the perfect time. It was right when I was starting to recognize the patterns in story structure, and things were starting to feel just a little bit too predictable for the antics of Ash and his friends. Pokémon Adventures, being aimed at the tween audience, allowed itself to be a little bit more complex. If you've heard anything about Pokémon Adventures, it's that it's so much more mature and edgy than the anime, but it's about on the same level as other stories with a tween-age audience in mind. While it does still follow a similar structure to the games and anime, it adds new story elements and ideas to help it stand apart from the crowd. It doesn't really do anything too far out there, but it does have its moments. The first 3 volumes were pretty good, and I enjoyed them about as much as I enjoyed every other graphic novel that I borrowed from my local library. They were fun and provided a different look at a world that I was deeply familiar with, and that was good enough for me to be invested. And then I picked up the 4th volume, and I finally understood what it meant to see yourself in a character. While the main plot of the series isn't really the focus of this video, I'm probably gonna just casually mention stuff that spoils the story. So if you want to read these books without knowing too much about them, read these books before listening to me talk about them. I don't know. Since Red's mysterious disappearance, Yellow, alongside presumably his only surviving Pokemon Pikachu, have been working to find him. On their journey, many of the same characters that Red encountered on his journey make an appearance, and we get to see how his disappearance has impacted them. Jumping ahead to Volume 6, the stakes are raised, and eventually the fight is taken to the base of the Elite Four, who, in this story, function very differently than their appearances in the games. They're villains here, and they're the evil team. Yellow and the rest of the team get split up, and at the same time that Red makes his long-awaited reappearance, we get a scene with Yellow where the big twist of the story happens. Yellow is trapped on the other side of this magic mirror ice window thing, and as Yellow is trying to get Red's attention, they can't break through, and the room is flooding with water, and it's a really tense situation. A huge wave of water rushes in and knocks Yellow's hat off. The character that we've been following, who has been assumed by every other character in the story, and the reader, to be a boy, is revealed to actually have been a girl this whole time. Now, I didn't exactly know why this reveal meant so much to me when I was younger. All I knew was that it meant something. Knowing that this character had spent the past 2 full volumes pretending to be a boy and keeping her actual identity a secret from those around her sparked something in me. And apparently I'm not alone. In researching for this project, I stumbled upon many other fans of the series who had a very similar experience to me. It's actually really heartwarming to know that other people also had that moment with this character, and it makes me feel more confident in my reading of her character. I want to emphasize my reading of her character. I'm reading between the lines here. This is me looking at the subtext of all of this stuff. If you want like a summary of the character, look on PokeWiki, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, this is an interpretation of the character, not like, the hard and fast rules of who this character is. Get out of my house. What the fuck? Yellow actually makes her first appearance before the end of the first arc, wherein she is lost in the forest. And boom, right here, freeze frame. Yes, in the very first panels that this character is introduced in, I have something to talk about. I have so many thoughts and feelings about this. This is Yellow when she's much younger. At this point in the story, she's about 8 or 9. It's not uncommon for young children to have a less rigid understanding of gender before they're taught the social norms of what is for boys or for girls. Little kids care a lot less about being the thing that they're supposed to be and tend to just live the way that feels most right for them. And it's not until learning what is considered to be the norm that they try to adjust more to align with what they're supposed to be. It's not until we know that there are rules that we start to follow them. Sure, this kid might just have a ponytail as shorthand to establish that this character is a little girl, because it's not uncommon for little girls to wear a ponytail. But the ponytail is just a very easy hairstyle to maintain when you're young and have long hair. Yellow's hair here is a representation of self-expression. It doesn't matter if boy or girl, all we know about this kid is that at this point in the story, they're lost. And I think the fact that she is lost is important here too. There's something in these trees that call to her, and in an attempt to understand it, she strays away from the path. It's when she's unfamiliar with where she is, however, that she starts to worry. Taking that step into the unknown is hard, especially when you're young, so it makes perfect sense that she wants to find her way back. Then she's attacked by a little dragon, and that's a small reminder that this is, in fact, still a Pokemon story, and I probably shouldn't be doing so much deep analysis on the symbolism, as it's almost certainly unintended, but I just can't help it. The curtains might be blue, but there's so much that had to happen for them to be this specific shade of blue. Get out of my house, oh my god. Given the rest of Yellow's story, her appearance here acts as a representation of that time during childhood before we know the rules and just do whatever feels right, even if she doesn't understand why she does it. Anyway, the rest of her appearance in this part is mostly spent building her connection with Red. It's nice to see him teach her about Pokemon, even helping her make her very first catch, a Rattata, who will later be nicknamed Ratty. After his battle with Giovanni, Yellow is at least partially responsible for helping Red recover, which is a nice nod to her role as the healer in later issues. Yellow wants him to stick around to be the new gym leader, and while Red thinks that would be cool, he doesn't feel qualified and goes off on the rest of his little journey. And that's all the Yellow we get for this part of the story. While the rest of her appearances are much more fleshed out, her introduction still gives us a pretty good foundation to build this analysis on. Even when the focus isn't on her specifically, Yellow has plenty of interesting moments that help inform her direction going forward. Now, going in order of release would bring us to her reintroduction at the beginning of the Yellow arc, but I actually want to skip ahead a little bit just to keep things a little bit more chronological. I feel like that helps the flow of this a little bit. Prior to the events of the Yellow arc, she hasn't really changed all that much since her introduction 2 years ago. Green, one of the main characters from the previous arc, is trying to track down Red, and while she's looking for him, she stumbles upon Yellow, and they get to talking, and Green finds out that Yellow knows who Red is, and recruits her to help find him. It isn't until interacting with Green that she gets her iconic straw hat and sets out in search of Red. Specifically, she's given the hat from Green, who says that keeping her identity a secret is easier if people think she's a boy. This is the rule that she learns, the path that she's told to follow. She also says that, she should hide her ponytail until you can use the fact that you're a woman as a weapon. Green, this child is 11. What do you mean? Why do you say the things that you do? Yellow is a fairly even-tempered character and is more willing to listen to the well-intentioned advice of someone who seemingly knows more than she does. The hat essentially allows her to go boy mode. It's something that helps her feel safe when she's under more uncertain circumstances. At this point in the story, it's a representation of keeping the truth about who she is a secret and how keeping that secret protects her. She adheres so closely to what Green tells her that she wears the hat constantly. When she's alone, while she's sleeping, it's practically part of her. Throughout the 4th volume, Yellow is established to have a special connection to Pokemon, being able to read their thoughts and use a form of healing magic. Her special empathy power exhausts her to the point of just immediately falling asleep. Now that's relatable representation if I ever did see it. She's just like me. She's just like me for real. Anyway, the story progresses, and near the end of the volume, she rescues this Caterpie from nearly becoming a ghost type and receives Pokemon from Brock and Misty, a Graveler and an Ammonite respectively. It's a nice way of these two doing something meaningful to protect her. The way Yellow's team grows is really interesting because so many of her Pokemon come from other characters and are therefore a representation of the bond between those characters. This isn't uncommon in the Adventures series, and even in the games, gift Pokemon pop up every now and then, but here specifically, this exchange really has that older siblings looking out for the youngest energy. During the 5th volume, with help from Blue, Yellow catches her second Pokemon. It's that same Caterpie that she rescued in the previous volume, but since she's not a very skilled trainer, it takes much longer than it typically would to catch a weak Pokemon like Caterpie. When she finally does, Ratty has gained enough experience to evolve, and when he does, Yellow bursts into tears. She really doesn't deal well with change, huh? Okay, I need you to walk with me here. Caterpillars are creatures that famously undergo metamorphosis. They're often used as allegory for entering into a new phase of living and are very commonly associated with the trans community for obvious reasons. In the very same moment that Yellow catches a caterpillar Pokemon, the first Pokemon that she ever captured evolves into a new form, and Yellow is visibly distressed by this. If our introduction to Yellow took place before she learns about the rules, this moment clearly takes place after they've been ingrained in her. This fear of allowing her Pokemon to change is one that feels like an extension of her own internalized fear of changing. Her Rattata is supposed to be a Rattata, that's what it's always been. She's supposed to wear the straw hat, she's supposed to stay on the path. It's the thing that's keeping her safe. And yeah, obviously catching a Caterpie doesn't automatically trans your gender, but I mean like as a metaphor. The 1-2 punch of catching Kitty and Ratty immediately evolving just feels too purposeful. It's really not uncommon for Pokemon teams to reflect the journey of their trainers, especially in the Adventures series. A really well-known example is Silver having his Pokemon use Frustration, a move that's more powerful the lower your friendship score, only to later replace that move with Return, which is more powerful with higher friendship. In addition to his Golbat evolving into a Crobat, an evolution that can only happen with high friendship shows that Silver has learned the value in not using Pokemon as tools, but in working with them like a real team, as friends. Ruby, who at the beginning of his adventure is vain and obsessed with beauty, initially adds Feebas to his team to prove that he can win in contests using even an ugly Pokemon, and only later appreciates the inner beauty of this Pokemon. It's a real ugly duck. Once he accepts his Pokemon for more than just how it looks, his Feebas is able to evolve into Melodic, its inner beauty now reflected in its outer beauty. While yes, sometimes a Pokemon is just a Pokemon, it can also be more than that. Yellow says that she won't let it bother her, that Ratty is Ratty and nothing can change the bond that they share. But when Blue shows her that she can halt the evolution of her Pokemon using the cancel function on the Pokedex, she uses it constantly, keeping her Pokemon small and cute for as long as possible. She's saying one thing, and her actions aren't matching up with it, clearly not ready to experience another drastic change. Does that make sense? That by not allowing her Pokemon to evolve, she's holding it back? Not because she actually wants her Pokemon to have their full potential kept from them, but because she's afraid of what it means to allow them to change, and how that goes against the rules. Thinking about transitioning is a long process. A lot of people know that it's what they want to do, what's right for them to progress and live a happy life. It's not uncommon, though, for that can to be kicked down the road for as long as possible. Not because it's the wrong decision, but because it can be scary. A lot of people put it off until they just can't anymore. Another thing I want to mention, now that she has a full team of 6, is the way that Yellow gets her Pokemon. More than half of her team belonged to other characters before ending up in her care, and the ones that she does catch are caught under the instruction of Red and Blue. She hates to battle Pokemon and only ever engages in combat when she's backed into a corner, which makes it very difficult for her to catch Pokemon. Difficult, but not impossible. This is me setting something up for later, so just remember that little thing that I just said. After completing her training with Blue, Yellow continues on her journey using what she learned to eventually find her way to Cerise Island, which is... Hey, that's the lair of the Elite Four. This is the part in the story that I used at the beginning of this. Yeah, nice. Yellow having her hat knocked off, having a force outside of her control reveal something about her that she doesn't want to share, makes me kind of emotional. She looks so ashamed to have this part of her be out in the open when she was told how important it was to hide it. When she wakes up, it's just Blaine there with her, someone that Yellow has bonded with and grown to trust, but even when it's just him, she can't help but shut down. She won't even let him finish his sentence, saying, "Please, don't ask now," before quickly putting her hat back on. Let's just say, I feel naked without this hat. We know that this is a relatively new development because she only recently started wearing it, but that's just indicative of how quickly these rules are ingrained in us. The desire to fit the mold is so strong that even just knowing that there's a mold at all is enough to completely alter a person's life. Anyway, so the story keeps on chugging, the Pokedex holders are all reunited, and Yellow goes on to battle against Lance. Obviously no match for him, she's not a very skilled trainer, and this guy is Kanto's most powerful flying-type specialist. Even giving it her all, she can't keep pace with him, and since he's also from Viridian Viridian Forest, he has the same healing ability as her, so it's even more unlikely that she wins this fight. And then Giovanni is there, and it's a whole thing because he's from Viridian Forest too, and he also has the healing and telepathic powers, and so it's like totally epic. But then it's like revealed that this was a trap all along, and Lance was expecting Giovanni to show up. So when it's like a whole, and then they can use the magic power to bring the big bird here. In an attempt to stop Lance, Yellow tries communicating with Lance's Pokemon, trying to prove to them that people and Pokemon can be friends, and that just because there are bad things that happen doesn't mean only bad things happen. She can't get through to it, and so she asks her Pokemon what she can do to help it understand, and this is where the tide starts to turn. She knows she's been wrong to do it, to hold her Pokemon back from evolving, but she truly loves her little friends, and nothing can change that. This is the moment where she starts to make that return to how she was before, learning the rules, less incessant on having things be the way they're supposed to be, but allowing them to grow as they were always meant to, willing to stray from the path even if it means getting lost again. She still has a way to go before allowing herself to take that step, but given her choices here, eventually it'll happen. She returns to face Lance, and as soon as it pops out of the Pokeball, her Caterpie evolves into a Metapod, and its hard exterior protects her from a Hyper Beam attack before immediately beginning to evolve again. As soon as it was able to, Kitty fast-tracks the entire evolutionary process, emerging from the cocoon it just entered, finally becoming a Butterfree. The rest of her Pokemon do the same, not wasting any time to embrace change. This part is really important to me. It's such a good way to show how far Yellow has come since the first time one of her Pokemon evolved. Yeah, she's in the middle of an intense battle right now, but even when the dust has settled, she doesn't cry. She doesn't even get upset. She acknowledges that they look different, sure, but it's a completely different reaction to when Ratty first changed. The power of friendship is arguably the most powerful force in the Pokemon universe, and Yellow shows that off here in all its glory. When given the space to grow and reach her full potential, you too have the power to electrocute a man, maybe even to death. Having just fully utilized her special empathy power, Yellow is obviously tuckered out and enters a free fall, probably hundreds of feet in the air. But it's okay, other trainers have flying Pokemon, and so she's fine. During her power nap, Yellow dreams of being with her Pokemon in Viridian Forest. She's back where we first met her, and this time, instead of Red helping her find her way, it's her Pokemon, her friends, that are there for her. Unafraid of becoming lost again, she follows them deeper into the forest, her trust in her friends indicative of her growing trust in herself. In her dream, Pika returns to Red, and though she's sad to see him go, she knows that it's only right. They belong together. Before she wakes up from this dream, though, she rests with her friends. Let's stay like we were before, just for a little while longer. And together they rest. Her Pokemon all in their unevolved forms from when they first met, and Yellow wearing her hat. Despite accepting that they need to move forward and change, despite it being what her Pokemon want, what she wants, for just a little while longer, they stay like this. She can't help but just kick that can a little further down the road. This panel just feels like an acknowledgement that the right thing to do for yourself is change, but not feeling ready to go through with it. Knowing you can't wear the straw hat forever, knowing the path won't lead you where you need to go. I also think this panel is just a very nice representation of that feeling of childhood. Growing up can be scary, especially if you're uncertain about where the future may take you, but the memory of simpler times will always be there. To be human is to have that complex relationship with the past. Who we were when we were younger may have been simpler, but to embrace change and accept that simplicity is fleeting is far more true to who we are. The memory is nice, but the future is bright. The forest is unknown yet inviting. You won't know what lies deeper within those woods if you don't seek it out. There isn't anything wrong with remembering the past, as long as we make sure not to stay like we were before, forever. So after Yellow's dream, she catches up with Red, and while that's happening, Bill asks Green about what's under Yellow's hat. Bill was there when her hat got knocked away at the end of the 6th volume, and knows that Green was the one that gave her the hat in the first place. Green mentions that Blue probably figured it out when they were training together, and the conversation eventually lands on the fact that, of the people here, Red is the only one who doesn't know about what's under Yellow's hat. While Green says that it's much more fun waiting for Red to figure it out, given the way that she's characterized and how practically everything she says and does is with secondary intention, I think it's fair to say that she means this and also knows that giving Yellow the agency to come out on her own terms is the right thing to do. Green lives for the drama, but also clearly cares about Yellow. There's a number of reasons that she wouldn't want Yellow to fully ditch the hat just yet, so trying to claim that Green is actively doing this to make life harder for Yellow would be a bad faith interpretation. This is also the part of the story where it seems that the admiration Yellow has for Red starts to be reframed as more of a crush. The hints have been there for a while, but it's here that we get the confirmation. She's very blushy in this last chapter, and they do this thing with the silk thread that connects the two of them together, a clear homage to the String of Fate, which is a concept similar to the whole soulmates thing. During the Yellow arc, capital T, so we're all on the same page when I say that, we see her go from being unfamiliar with societal norms to fully embracing and adhering to them, to understanding that the adherence to those expectations will only hold you back. She still has some work to do before she can be free from those expectations, but at least she knows that step is one she's capable of taking. She'll make that trek into the deeper parts of the forest eventually, when she's ready to. This would be a beautiful place for Yellow's story to come to a close. It's open-ended, yet her trajectory is clear. I'm glad it's not, though. She's just so silly. Even when she's not the main character, she brings something special to the story she's in. Yellow doesn't play as big of a role in the Gold-Silver arc, but she does have a few moments in the spotlight. Most of her character growth happens in between the big story stuff, though. A year has passed since we last saw these characters, and in that time, Yellow still hasn't come out to Red. That's not to say she hasn't come out at all, though. Interestingly enough, Yellow has confided in Blue's older sister Daisy. There's part of me that wants to make the argument that she feels comfortable talking to her because Blue is also a trans character. Even though he clocked Yellow during their time together, he kept it to himself. And of course, there's the famous, "My grandson, what was his name again?" And so Daisy would have some first-hand experience helping someone come to terms with their transness. But I don't want to go too far into the headcanon weeds. It's extremely easy to have this video snowball into how every Pokemon trainer is queer and neurodivergent, so I'm just going to rein it in a little bit. It's worth pointing out that at this point in the story, it's shown that Yellow does actually take her hat off, if only when she's in the comfort of her own home. What's more is that she's comfortable to the point of not wearing her hat in front of her fisherman friend. This is, of course, after making sure of who it is that wants into her house. Presumably, if it was someone else, she would have gone hat mode. Actually, it's kind of funny. In the original version of this story, it's made well and clear that this character is Yellow's uncle. His name is Winston, I think. But in the English translation, this guy is just Yellow's pal. She calls him Fisherman like it's his name. It's really funny, like her best friend is some fisherman who's just constantly smoking a cigarette. This is a friendship that happens because these two both worked at the local Pokemart together, I can just tell. Not long after being reintroduced to Yellow again, we're introduced to Choo-Choo, the latest member of Yellow's team. And so this is me circling back around to how Yellow's Pokemon team are a reflection of her. Remember that? It's important stuff. In her introduction, Red helps her catch a Pokemon. She's basically following his instructions the whole time, completely unfamiliar with the process, but she can at least follow his instructions and understands that it can be done this way. In her last appearance, Yellow captures a Caterpie following the direct instructions of Blue, but before he helps her, she's shown to have been trying to make the catch on her own for an extended period of time. Blue is shocked that Yellow seems utterly incapable of catching even a Caterpie, which is known to be one of the easiest captures a trainer can make. Clearly, the norm for most trainers isn't something that makes sense to her. Introduced in this arc, though, is Choo-Choo. Using the games as a reference point, Pikachu, with a catch rate of 190, that's 24%, is a much more difficult Pokemon to capture when compared to Rattata and Caterpie, which both have a catch rate of 255, that's 33%. So did Yellow finally figure it out and learn how to catch Pokemon like everyone else? Of course not. Yellow tells the fisherman that she came across this wounded Pikachu and, using her healing abilities, nursed it back to health, after which Choo-Choo willingly joined her team. This is Yellow not learning how to catch a Pokemon the way that others do, but instead using her own unique skills to make a meaningful addition to her team. She's doing what feels right for her and not trying to catch Pokemon specifically the way that she should. What's more is that this is the first Pokemon in Yellow's team that's not a boy. Like, the first capture she makes that doesn't require the guidance of another trainer, the first one she adds to her team by allowing herself to do things her way. A girl just like her. It's just, I care so much about her. And so yeah, the plot continues. Yellow plays a part in resurrecting the legendary beasts. She meets the new protagonist. She's attacked by Team Rocket, all that good stuff. The stuff I care about, though, happens pretty much near the end of the arc. All but one of the Pokedex holders are trapped in these ice restraints, which can't be melted with normal fire. The one exception is Gold, who is trapped in this weird dimension between dimensions. It's like a temporal rift kind of thing. While it was revealed to us, the readers, a little bit earlier on in the story, it's revealed now to the rest of the characters that Yellow has what they need. The feathers attached to her hat are actually the rainbow and silver wings. The problem, however, is that Green did too good of a job of sticking these feathers in here, and they are stuck in there, which leaves Yellow with only one option. To get the feathers to where they need to be, she needs to remove her hat. I actually kind of hate this moment. It's the second time that Yellow has had this choice taken away from her. But this time, as opposed to having it knocked off her head, her hand is forced and she needs to remove it herself. It's even more emotional than the first time it happens, not only because it happens in front of so many of her peers, but because she's been growing the confidence to come out since the beginning of this story. Oh, my ducky died. Okay, it's fine. I can sit in the dark. I can only imagine how it feels to have thought about finally doing this thing, envisioning the ways she might do it and how the people she cares about might react, only to have those dreams taken from you because the greater good demands it. This is obviously much more dramatic, and that's why it happens this way. This is an unfortunate symptom of being a character that's accidentally queer-coded in a story that's aimed at younger audiences. Gold, gold, gold. Pokemon Trainer Gold, 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 gold. Pokemon Trainer Gold. Why is it so weird to say gold? Gold, after being freed from the between dimension, says that it's obvious that Yellow was fighting her own battle to take off that hat. Which is just, it's too on the nose to not be worth something. Come on, the subtext has literally become text. He said the quiet part out loud, and now all I can think about is this precious face. She means so much to me, oh my god. The removal of Yellow's agency in this very personal story has always bothered me. Yes, she's been working up to this since the beginning of the story, and so the obvious conclusion for Yellow is to finally choose to, but she doesn't choose to take off her hat in this moment. Because the stakes of what might happen if the Mask of Ice isn't stopped from messing with the space-time continuum are so high, she's backed into a corner here. There's a lot going on this time around. And so once the world is saved, the Pokedex holders are all just kind of catching up, and that's the end of that story. Yellow's arc isn't over yet, but we can still look at how far she's come. Building on where she was at the end of the Yellow arc, she does start to take those steps. She's not wearing the hat when she's by herself anymore, and has even started coming out to those closest to her. While ultimately her big coming out moment was out of her hands, with the band-aid ripped off, Yellow can now focus a little bit more on where to go from here. The Fire Red Leaf Green arc isn't really all that interesting, but there's, a couple things here that are worth looking at. This is the first appearance of Yellow after coming out to her peers. Immediately we see that there's been growth here. She's out and about in her hometown without the straw hat, and that's already a pretty substantial change. It's nice that she doesn't feel the need to be wearing the hat at all times. It's also worth mentioning that Yellow is drawn with a far more feminine appearance this time around. I'm pretty sure this is more than just an art style thing too. In a flashback panel depicting her during the Yellow arc, she's drawn in the same way that she was back then, with much more androgynous features. Now, 4 years later, she's a bit more femme-presenting. While earlier on it was much easier for Yellow to wear the hat and be perceived as a boy, now, a couple years after having come out to her friends, brand new characters are able to immediately tell that she's a girl. Her bond with her Pokemon is shown to also be even stronger now, and that's kind of why I'm leaning so hard into Yellow's team's growth being a parallel to her own. Of all the trainers in the series, she has the strongest bond with her Pokemon, so it makes sense that her story is better understood by looking at the story of her team. This is also just a really cool moment. It also serves as a way to explain how Yellow's team was able to power up and defeat Lance. It's shown that the power of friendship literally increases their quantifiable power levels. Even the other Viridian Forest magic users don't have this ability, and that's part of what sets her apart from the rest of them. I think there's something to be said about how Yellow still wears the straw hat. I think it represents something more complex than just hat equals boy, no hat equals girl. The hat is allowed to change its meaning as the story progresses, and while it might have once been used as a way to hide Yellow's true self, the fact that she still insists on wearing it when it's time to get serious feels more like it makes her feel safe. That's not really a change though. The hat has always been something that she's worn to feel safe, just now it's a less restrictive version of that safety. Plus, let's not forget the hat was a gift from Green, one of the characters that Yellow has a close connection to. In the same way that Ratty and Kitty tie her to Red and Blue, the hat ties her to Green. All three of these characters play a pretty important role in Yellow's own journey of self-acceptance. There's not all that much that happens here. She falls down a black hole, and I think she's asleep after that, actually. I think she just sleeps for the entire rest of the story. But she finally gets her own Pokedex, and then towards the end of the story, they are all turned to stone. No need to panic, though. At the end of the Emerald arc, they all have their petrification undone, and all is well. Nothing too exciting happens with Yellow. The trainers all take part in a tournament that they don't have time to show us, but we know that Yellow loses pretty immediately. And then we don't really see her again. I wish her character arc had stuck the landing a little bit stronger, but at this point the big important plot just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and so it's hard to fit good characterization in there when the stakes are on a galactic level. And with 2 or 3 new protagonists introduced at the beginning of each series, it's a little bit difficult to tell stories when the cast is getting so big. They really pulled back on recurring characters after this point. They wanted to focus the story a little bit harder here. So it's easy to understand why Yellow's story feels like it didn't really stick the landing, but it's still a little bit disappointing. So while I'm recording this, Yellow has yet to make a return in any of the more recent Pokémon Adventures series. This isn't the end of the world. Not including every single protagonist in every single story allows the more focused arcs to do what they're supposed to be doing a little bit more tightly. If I really want to get my hopes up though, I don't think it'd be out of place for Yellow to make another appearance in the Scarlet and Violet arc. You know, when they finally get going on that. At least in the localized versions of the story, Yellow seemingly has some Spanish heritage, and with the Paldea region drawing inspiration from the Iberian Peninsula, maybe that heritage would finally come into play. This is pretty much stepping into the headcanon zone, but if Yellow were to make another appearance, I'd hope that her story finally gets a solid ending. That moment at the end of the Yellow arc was probably the best that she got, and it's kinda unfortunate that she didn't get a nice send-off like the rest of the Kanto Dex holders. She wouldn't even need to have like a main role in the entire run of Scarlet and Violet. Giving her a nice side story would be a good way to see how she's progressed from her last appearance. I think her story could center around helping Choo-Choo evolve. She's the only member of Yellow's team to not have fully evolved, and what's more is that it's the only one that requires an outside force to do so. Using her newly acquired Pokédex to research and find out how to get Choo-Choo to evolve would be a really nice piece of storytelling. Using the device that she once used to keep her Pokémon from evolving to instead learn how to help Choo-Choo evolve would be a nice parallel. Or reflection, or something. She grows by allowing the rest of her Pokemon to evolve, and so actively choosing to give Choo-Choo a Thunderstone and therefore the chance to become fully realized would be the natural next step of Yellow's character arc. Going from crying over her Pokemon evolving to accepting it to actively helping her Pokemon evolve would be a really nice way to end off Yellow's story. And the best part is that she wouldn't even need to evolve her Pokemon right then and there. Just having the Thunderstone would allow her Pikachu to take that step when she's ready for it. Sure, Choo-Choo's desire to evolve is what would have kicked off this story, but that doesn't mean that as soon as they have the stone, she'll be ready. Yellow, of all people, obviously understands that feeling and holds onto the stone until the time is right. Why she needs to go all the way to Paldea to do this is anyone's guess. Maybe the fisherman wants her to visit some family. Or maybe in the same way that the partner Pikachu from Yellow version and Let's Go are incapable of evolving, so too is Choo-Choo, and so they need to track down those special evolution stones that Red used to have to make it work. Yellow means a lot to me, and one day when the Kanto games are remade for the 5th time, I really hope they finally add her. I know that she's not really on the same level as the other Kanto characters, but I would love for more people to get the chance to meet her. Much like how Green in the Let's Go games isn't exactly a version of Green from the manga, I'm sure that this version of Yellow would be a little bit different, but it would still be nice to see her get that game counterpart treatment. Speaking of, I'm not going to be able to talk about this anywhere else, so I might as well just talk about it here. The teams that these three have in Let's Go are just slightly wrong. I mean, it's not all weird. I love that they have the starters that correlate to this Ken Sugimori art because it's the same art that inspired the starter choice in the manga. And Red having Charizard never really sits right with me. No matter how much Game Freak tries to make Fire Red happen, it's not gonna happen. This is definitely one of Red's most creative teams, simply due to the fact that it's not 2/3 starter Pokemon. It's nice to see, but randomly giving Red Machamp just feels really weird, especially when Red has never had one on his team before. Someday when Red comes back again, I'd like to see Espeon make a return to his team, but I can see why they didn't include a Johto Pokemon in this Kanto game. See, I understand that Blue has an Aerodactyl in reference to his Black 2, White 2, and Sun and Moon teams, and since Trace uses Pidgeot, it'd be redundant for both of these high-level trainers to have the same Pokemon on their team. It's just kinda weird that half of Blue's team has the Flying type when he's usually such a well-rounded trainer. What's more is that in the Kanto games, it's canonically Red who even gets the chance to restore the old Amber and add Aerodactyl to his team. It's also kinda weird to me that Red is without a single Flying type and Blue has 3. Just switch them. Just switch them up. Tauros is a nice addition though. It being a nod to the Professor Oak battle that never made its way into the game is a cool little reference. Probably the most exciting part of the Let's Go games is Green making her first ever non-player appearance. But, because this is her first ever appearance, it means that she was destined to have a weird team. It's a crime that only half of her little pink friends are represented here. I like the reference to the Gengar is Clefable's shadow theory, so Gengar can stay, and with all 3 of these legacy trainers having a Fire, Water, Grass core, these 3 all kinda need to be here for cohesion's sake, but the normal type tanky Pokemon could literally be Wigglytuff and make the team a much better reference to Green's most fleshed out and technically original appearance. Following the pattern set by these trainers, Yellow probably wouldn't have her exact team from the manga, so I think it could look a little something like this. I couldn't really decide whether or not Raticate should be here, but despite it being her first partner Pokemon, Dodrio is much more iconically Yellow's Pokemon. Also, I think that Dodrio could put up more of a fight. Sorry, Ratty. Keeping the Firewater Grass core meant that Gravy also didn't make the cut, but I like to think that Ammonite being a water rock type Pokemon helps keep both Misty and Brock represented on her team. The only other fire type that could have been on this team is Magmar, but I wanted to keep the fully evolved pattern going. And Rapidash ties better in with the Western inspirations for Yellow's character, so that's why Rapidash is here. Vileplume is here because the only other option for Gen 1 grass types would have been Parasect, and while I love Parasect for being two of my favorite things wrapped up in one little freak, Yellow already has a bug type on her team in Butterfree, and avoiding overlap wherever possible is a bit more fun for me. Having a Alolan Raichu on the team is a fun reference to Yellow's telepathic abilities, a nice nod to her arc from the manga, and a very easy way to make sure that Pikachu still gets to stay in the spotlight on Red's team. You know, I think I'll always feel bad for Raichu. They really introduced an item that doubles attack and special attack that only Pikachu can use, just so that their mascot could be viable. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh right, queer people. Hey, I'm one of those. The first Pokemon game I ever played was Platinum. It starts pretty much like all the other games in the series. The professor welcomes you to the wonderful world of Pokemon and then asks you to make the famous first decision of your Pokemon career. Are you a boy or are you a girl? I remember seeing this screen for the first time and just staring at it for a long time. The question, in my very little interpretation of it, was asking me if I was a boy or a girl, and the only answer I had the vocabulary to respond to that question with locked me out of the choice to be the stylish, cool character that I recognized from the cartoon I liked. And instead I had to be... this guy? Who even is this guy? I don't want to be that guy. But the question wasn't who do you want to play as, the question was, are you a boy or are you a girl? Even at that point, I knew that if I played the game as Dawn, whenever I wanted to trade or battle with my friends, they would see that I chose to play as a girl, and even when I was in the first grade, I knew they would have thought that wasn't something I was supposed to do. So I got stuck as this guy. As the years went by, Pokemon became a less social game for me, and I felt a bit more security in going back and playing as the objectively better character. It was nice knowing I wouldn't be sitting on the bus having my little nerd friends asking me why I wanted to play as the girl character. The fun answer is that she's just got a way better fit. What the fuck are these boys wearing? Oh my... The more real answer, though, is that I just never saw myself as the boy character and only ever picked him because I felt like I was supposed to. Reading Yellow's story helped me realize that just doing what I was supposed to do wasn't the same as doing what was right for me. And so I'm here today, still wandering through the forest, and I wouldn't return to the path for anything. Hey, it's me. And this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for getting to this part of the video. If you liked the things that you saw and heard today, you can press the like button, you can comment and tell me what it was specifically that you liked, and you can also tell me what I can do to make my audio sound a little bit better. I'm still kind of figuring it out, and I don't want to buy a microphone, so if there are any cool ideas that you have, send them my way. And if you want to see more of what I will be making in the future, the subscribe button is yours to press at your leisure. But if you don't do any of those things and you still want to do something, you can watch the other video that I have. I think there's a really good chance that it's the only other video on my channel at the time that you're watching this. If not, then that's really impressive. Thank you for coming from the future to watch this video. Watching multiple of my videos in a row is really, really helpful in helping YouTube know that the stuff that I am making is stuff that people want to watch. And if you want to do that, that would be super awesome. If you're coming here from my Wind Waker video, thank you so much. I really appreciate, like, holy moly, the response on that video has been so good so far. I'm really, really glad that people like it. The next one, I don't want to rush it, so it's still probably a couple of months down the road, but in between then and now, I definitely will have at least something else. I will have at least another Zelda thing. Hopefully that is of interest. I've done a video game thing, I've done a book thing now with Pokémon Adventures. I'm thinking the next thing could be a movie thing, but we'll see if I am inspired by that idea in the future still. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully you'll want to listen to me do all of this again in the future. I've been Jam. Thanks for letting me babble.